Although tonight is Sukkot, which is Zaman Simchoseinu, I want to look at a particular pasuk in Ha'azinu. And the pasuk in Ha'azinu, which I will share with you in a minute, was prompted over the Yomim Noroim because I got caught up in the Yom Kippur liturgy this year with the martyrology of the 10 martyrs. B, this is the first year that I have taken over my father's minhag to say yortzeit for his parents who died in the Holocaust, and no one knows when, so he asked Reb Shlomo Baumgarten from Vienna when he should keep the yortzeit. You know, some people keep it on Yom HaShoah, some people keep it on Tisha B'Av, and for some reason he said to him, keep it on keep it on Rosh Hashanah. So this year, since he's not able to go to shul anymore, I took over the minhag of saying Kaddish for them, and I performed the Yizkor as the Shliach Tzibur on Yom Kippur. It also coincides with my son's near publication of the letters. There are some 200 letters from my father's parents to him between 1939, when he got out on the Kinder transport to London, and the time they stopped writing when they were deported along with all the other Jews of Vienna in 1942 to Izbitzer and then on to either Sobibor or Belzec concentration camps. And those letters were handwritten, needed to be deciphered, and he did that. Took 2 years to find someone who could translate the Österreich, which is a kind of Viennese dialect of German. And now they're coming out, and he was talking about it over Rosh Hashanah, and that really kind of welled up in me unheard of stories and stuff that was going on in Vienna at the time, and my father reporting to them. One of the most poignant being my father's father asking him, "Did you find a minyan in London? Are you going to minyan?" He was so strict about daily minyan in London. So that brought up stuff for me. And then I read this book over Yom Tov called Out of the Depths, Rabbi Lau's personal biography, which I'll come back to, which also, is his personal biography of going through Auschwitz. And then some personal grief issues. So this pasuk stood out for me, and I'm sharing it with you now. Hazinu Hashamayim, okay, blah blah blah, Yarov Kamata, Kishem Hashem Ekra, and next comes this that stuck out for me like a sore thumb. Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. Hatzur Tamim Pa'alo. Hatzur is the rock. It's mentioned 12 times in Hazinu. The rock meaning that which is unshakable, the divine. Tamim Pa'alo, his actions in the world, in history, are tamim, perfect. Ki kol drachav mishpat, because his ways are full of justice. El emunah, he's a faithful God. Ve'ein avel, there's no falsehood, unlike other justices. Tzadik v'yasharhu, he is true and upright. Interestingly, the first thing that hit me when I was thinking about this was nothing other than, you got it. I'm showing you a cemetery. When we bury someone, the ceremony is called Tzadok Hadin or Tziduk Hadin. Once the grave completely fills with earth and the top is the shape of a small mound, a marker is placed on the grave with the name of the deceased and the date of passing. And now the prayer Tzadok Hadin is recited. Tzadok Hadin means the justification for the judgment. The mourners declare their acceptance of God's decree and pray to God to have mercy on those who are living. Tzadok Hadin, coming from Hatzur Tamim Palo. How do I know? Because we quote from it. Look, Hatzur Tamim Palo, we quote from our pasuk in this week's parsha, in the prayer for the dead. We are claiming nothing about the dead person. What we're doing is proclaiming, like in Kaddish. I've written about that when I lost my mum. You can go to my website about one poem and 3 essays about Kaddish. That the Kaddish and here we are affirming God's justice and our faith in God, the rock perfect in all his works. Who can say to him, what have you done? It's a kind of soliloquy about, in the middle of this shock of grief, we are invited to declare the justice of the divine. And I love this picture because the EU recently pledged a few million euros to commit to restoring the European grave sites. This one is Reb Nosson of Breslov. I took it when I was in Uman 3 years ago. I think, Alan, you were with me. It was out of town, and he's buried in that horrible graveyard. Anyway, let's look at what the Mefarshim tell us. First, Rashi. Nope, that's not Rashi. Let me just make sure. I've got to find a better way of doing this. Here we are. So Rashi tells us immediately, Hatzur pamim ta'alo, afal pi shehu chazak. What does that mean? Even though he is strong. Because it says, Hatzur pamim pa'alo, ki. The word ki is not used.
Julian,
Yes.
Julian, sorry. Could you please share the screen?
Thank you. Can you see it now?
Yes. Yeah.
The word ki is not used in the sense because. It's not providing the reason why, but he is strong. Kishemevi Peronius, when he brings judgment al ovre ritzon on those who transgress him. And what makes it just? Lo b'shetef. He doesn't bring it in a torrent. Ki im badin, with justice. It's meted out with justice. There is mitigation. There is mercy. It's all a combination. Hatzur tamim. So for Rashi, the word tamim means it's not just a vindictive punishment. Eil emunah, what does that mean? A faithful God. What is aman, faithful? L'shalem l'tzadikim tzidkasam l'olam haba. To pay the righteous in the next world, even though he delays their payment. Meaning, they're still suffering. The righteous are suffering. And so Rashi is telling us the word emunah means it's not about this world, it's about the next world. He postpones it. But sofa la'amein, emunah. Sofa la'amein, he makes his words come true. La'amein estavorov. He makes his words come true. So Rashi is really going to town on, and again, I go back to the whole inyan of Rashi in Troy, seeing the Crusades, seeing massacres of Jewish community in Mainz, Speyer, and Worms on his way to Jerusalem to rescue the holy city from the infidel, right? Killing Jews on the way, thousands and thousands. And Rashi being aware of that, knowing that it's unjustified. So the emunah is that it will be repaid in the future. Even though you may think it's not tamim, it's not tzedek. No. Rashi is reassuring us. If we go to the Ramban, Nachmanides, he says this is an illusion. His work is perfect. It's the attribute of justice. It's the attribute of justice. God has an attribute of mercy, an attribute of justice, and his ways are justice, but they are merciful ways, meaning that in the justice there is mercy. Ramban is struggling between the Midas Hadin and the Midas Harachmim. Very nice. Now, let me just share with you now the Midrash. And the Midrash now takes us into a different path. For the Midrash, we're all struggling with the same issue. Dova acher, what does tamim mean? Afilu im Rom sheKadosh Baruch Hu matzdik is a Rasha. Oh my giddy aunt. Now we're coming into the deep dive. Even when you see empirically, historically, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's matzdik es harasha. The Rasha gets away with it. Crime pays. Where do you see that the righteous are getting their reward? Umar shiyur es hatzadik. And he goes even further and says, the righteous are getting the short end of the stick and they're suffering. Im kol zot nema hatzrot pamim talo. Now, hatzrot pamim talo becomes a category of faith, and it's counterintuitive. It goes against everything we in Galut have seen. Nevertheless, it becomes an article of faith. Eil emunah ve'ein other. And he then brings a mashal. And the mashal is a medical one. L'choyle shehoya mushlach lamita. A sick person is confined to bed. Holach harofe v'rosa. So the doctor comes and pays a house call. And he tells you should eat this and you shouldn't eat that. Fine. Because if you eat that, it's dangerous for you and you may die, right? Don't eat salty food because you get hypertension and a stroke. But what does the chola do? He's powerless over salty food, his herring. He needs his schmaltz herring, and he eats the salty herring. To the point at which his sodium is up to the roof, he's got palpitations, and he's in kidney failure. Omru lo, so they say to him, Shema harofe asa goram lecha. So his friends come and say, oh my gosh, look what that bloody doctor did to you. You're dying. He made a house call a few weeks ago, and look at you, you're on your deathbed. It's his fault. Omar lahem. So the patient tells his friends, Ani hu she'asisi le'atzmo, she'ilu shamati lo ma she'tzavoni lo ha'yisi meis. I caused this. It's the schmaltz herring. If I'd listened to the doctor, I wouldn't be dying. Okay? And that is a mashal when they come to Moshe and say, Mi goram lecha shelo yikanesa etzor. Who caused this that you shouldn't go into Eretz Yisrael? Remember, this is Parshas Hazinu. This is his final song that he leaves Am Yisrael, Klal Yisrael with it. And he is saying, Hatzur Tamim Palo, God is just. Just? Klal Yisrael comes to him and says, I want you to tell me, where's the justice here? Omar lahem Moshe. So Moshe says, like the sick patient on his dying bed, Ani garamti. I am the one that caused this punishment, that I will not go into Am Yisrael. Why? Didn't HaKadosh Baruch Hu do this to you? Omar lahem chas v'shalom. Remember what God said to Adam Arishon. Mi goram lecha misa. Who caused you to die? Omar lahem Adam Arishon ani. It was my fault. V'lo asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Didn't God commit you to die after 120 years? No. Chas v'shalom. The mashal of the doctor. I am the one who ate the shmaltz herring. I ate from the true tree of the fruit of knowledge. Therefore, I caused my own demise. Moshe Rabbeinu is comparing himself to Adam Arishon, in which Moshe Rabbeinu, he hit the rock instead of whatever. So that is a kind of God as the healer, God as the doctor, diagnosing you, telling you what's wrong with your humanity, your human condition, telling you what you need to do, Torah mitzvahs, and you caused your own death. You caused your own death. So that is the struggle of the Bala Medrash to make sense of Hatzur Tomim Polo that's stuck right in Ha'azinu. Dova Acher. Mahu Atmimus. Where is the Tmima? You said Tomim? That's a lot of guile. There's a lot of scheming going on here. What's the Tmimus? Ela Pu'ulosa Shleima Im Kol Ba'olam. So the Bala Medrash is saying that Tmimus here doesn't mean simple-minded or simple, but Shleima. Tmimus means it's integrated, the good and the bad, the righteousness, the chesed and the gevur, everything is integrated. Ve'ein laharher achamasov afilu tano shel klum. Do not question divine justice, not even a smidgen. Ki kol drochav mishpat. Now, both these midrashim are telling us that we have cause to question. This is 4th century, 400 years after the Churban. Did the punishment fit the crime? Is galus is it what we would expect? It doesn't fit the crime. So you see the difference between the medievalists who are justifying everything is good, everything, and the midrash that is much more overt about the implications by the reader, because we're the people asking the patients, well, the doctor caused this, and we're asking Moshe Rabbeinu, what caused you to have to go to die? Let's look at a Gemara. I want to share with you a Gemara that came to my mind, even though the words are not, identical. This is a Gemara in Avodah Zarah. Nope. Trying to get the other one. This Gemara comes from Avodah Zarah. And the Gemara is talking about Tashmishe Avodah Zarah, fine, whether it's a bama, where the person was judged. Still not. All right, this is the one. So there's a story. No. Alan, you're going to have to show me how to label these better. Did that? It must be this one. So, Gemara goes as follows. Now remember, this is my midrash. the danger posted by pagan halls of justice, okay? Tana Rabbana. Let's learn a piece of Gemara. I don't know anyone else who's used this Gemara as to bear on Hazinu. And as my father-in-law reminds me all the time, Julian, after 2,000 years of Gemara, it's all been said before. So don't think that what you're saying is such a big chiddush. But I didn't see anyone talk about it. Tana Rabbana. The rabbis learned it. Kishenitpas Rabbi Eliezer leminus. When Rabbi Eliezer, now Rabbi Eliezer, who's this Rabbi Eliezer? Rabbi Eliezer, here is Rabbi Eliezer HaGodel, otherwise known as Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. Very, very interesting character. He was a Kohen. Lots of stories about him. Very severe and domineering with his pupils. And he is not one of the Asora Heruge Malchus. His death is somewhere else. He's not one of the 10 martyrs. But in the Tosefta and in the Gemara and in Kohelet Rabbah, he was arrested for minus. Now, what does this minus mean? For heaven's sake, don't look at the art scroll, because the art scroll, quoting Rashi, says the heretic seized him to force him to worship idols. We're not talking about heretics. We're not talking about idols. A min, according to some scholars, is mi talmide Yeshu ha-notzri. Mem yud nun mi talmide Yeshu ha-notzri. So minus means to Christianity. He was seized by the Roman hegemonon, Hela Lagardom Lidon. They brought him up to the court of the Lishka Zakozis in the Sanhedrin on the house in the temple to be judged. Omalo Hegemon, the Roman official in charge, said to him accusingly, what did he say to him? Zokein. A wise man as yourself should engage in such idle matters. Meaning, should a person of your stature engage in the dictates of Torah or the study of Minas? So Art Scroll says you shouldn't be studying Torah. So the Art Scroll is making this into a problem between the Romans and the Jews. This is not about that. The Roman procurate is a judge because obviously someone has ratted on Eliezer ben Hyrcanus for learning idle matters such as Christian myth or Christianity. Omalo, Rabbi Eliezer says to him, and these are the words that reminded me of the Tzodok Hadin, of Hatsur Tomim Polo, because Hatsur Tomim Polo is everything we say when we're about to die or we buried someone. He says, Ne'eman alai hadayan. The judge is trusted by me. What does that mean? The judge is trusted by me. Well, we can see by the response of the judge. Omalo. Kesavur, the judge, thought, Oso Hegmon, hu omer, that he was talking about himself. The judge thought that the Dayan was not the Dayan in heaven, but the judge. And so he said to him, V'hu lo amar elo keneged aviv shemayim. He didn't mean that judge. Rabbi Eliezer was proclaiming his trust in God, the true judge, meaning, I acknowledge the correctness of God's punishing me for some past offense by putting me in this situation. It's a stunning, stunning moment. Eliezer is saying, Tzadok Hadin, I don't know what I've done wrong, but I must have done something wrong. Very Jewish, typical guilt, Jewish guilt. I must have done something wrong, and therefore I am in this situation. I've been hauled up into a tribunal. I know I will be crucified for this, for following that sect, but it's God's decision. And that's how I know what he means. Keneged evovi shebashamayim. But what does the judge say? Amalo, hoel vehemanti olecho. Since you have made me trusted by you, meaning what? Meaning that vehemanti, that you have trusted me. You have made me trusted by you. Really, there is a problem in the text of the Gemara. There is an emendation. It should be vehe'emantani. You have made me trusted by you. It's in the Hifil. Not that you have trusted me, but you have made me trusted by you. Since you put your trust in me, Dimus Potterat, I give you a document of dismissal, Dimus in Greek. You are acquitted. Okay, everything should be happy. It's not. Now things devolve. Kisheba lebeso, when Rabbi Eliezer comes back to his house, nichnasu talmidav etzlo lenachamo, his students came in to console him. Why? Lenachamo, to console him? What was he, sitting shiva? He was mourning the fact that he couldn't identify the sin that precipitated the incident. He's sitting there on the floor, mourning the fact that God had hauled him up for a reason. He couldn't give a hang what he got off the hook, what the goy did, and he felt that he was talking about him and not. V'lo kibel olav tanchum, he wouldn't accept consolation. Amalo Rabbi Akiva. Finally, Rabbi Akiva comes up to him. Rebbe, tarsheni lo madova echad mima shelimadata. Can you permit me to say one thing from what you have taught me? You taught me something. Amalo. So he said, yes, Rabbi Akiva, please say it. So Rabbi Akiva then is now going to remind Rabbi Eliezer of something that may have been the cause for God's punishment. Rebbe, Shema minus bol yoduchon. So he says, my teacher, perhaps, in fact, the fact that you were accused of meanness, of heresy, of Christian doctrine, maybe some teaching of heresy came by your hand, and in fact, you did not, push it away. And what was that? Don't know why this happened. We got it. Hinecha, and it pleased you. That piece of Christian doctrine came by you, and I remember, because I was your Talmud, and it pleased you. It appeared proper. It was a good pshat. This Christian pshat was good. What was it? Olav nitfasto. And the content of that pshat that pleased you, that you didn't reject because it was from Minus, maybe that's why you were seized and nearly coerced into worshipping idols or die. Amalo, Rabbi Eliezer said to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva, his katani, I can't remember. Tell me what it was. And here goes the story. Pam achas, hayisi mahalech b'shuk ha'elyon shel tzipor. You told me this story. I was once walking in the shuk, in the marketplace of Tzipori. Umotzasi echad. I found someone whose name was Jacob ish Kfas Chanya, a particular heretic whose name was Yaakov Kfar Chanya. His name was Yaakov ish Kfar. Now you have to know the following. We have a printed edition of Gemara Avodah Zarah, and you have to know that it has been censored, because we find in the Paris manuscript 1337 and the JTS manuscript 44830 that it says Echad mi talmidei Yeshu hanotri ish Kfas Chanya. Yaakov was a disciple of Jesus of Nazareth, and in the Medrash HaGodol, the reference is to Yaakov Ishkva Sichnin, the Ben Pantiri, Pantera or Pandera, which is a corruption of the son of Parthenos. In Greek, Parthenos is the virgin, the son of the virgin, Parthenos. So we have documentary proofs that this is a corrupted edition because it was censored by the church to take out a Talmud of, but we have two other versions of this Gemara, one early in Kohelet Rabbah and one in Midrash HaGodol, which is later, which has that this was Talmidei Yeshua Notzri. I accounted this Christian. Omali, he said to me, and now he's going to do a drush. He's going to do a midrashic trope that's going to please Rabbi Elazar. Katuv b'Toratechem, lo tavi esnan zona. It says in the Deuteronomy 23:19, you shall not bring a harlot's hire or the exchange for a dog to the house of Hashem your God for any vow, because they are an abomination to your God. Meaning, if an animal such as a sheep or an ox had been given in payment for the services of a harlot or in exchange for a dog, it cannot be offered as a sacrifice in the holy temple. Okay. Velo omarti lo klum. I did not reply to him. What does that mean? At this point, Rabbi Eliezer acted correctly. It's forbidden to discourse and debate with a heretic. So far, he's on the right side of halacha. I never said anything. Omali, but he then went to say to me the following. Kach lim datani. I want to give you a proof for why the payment for a hooker shouldn't be used. Because we learned ki me esnan zona ki batzavat esnan zona yoshivu. The pasuk in Micah, in which God tells what's going to happen when he destroys everything, he says it'll be so bad that they will collect a harlot's hire and they will revert to a harlot's hire. A pasuk from Micah. Why? The building materials that will be used to build will be coming from a harlot's hire. They will revert to a harlot's hire to rebuild. Meaning, mimkomatinofis, a place of filth, meaning a place of ill repute they came from, limkomatinofis yelechu, and they will go to a place of filth, What's a place of filth? So the Talmid of Yeshua Notzri said, he's giving a lom du shataich, from a place of filth to a place of filth. We know, you have to know that that Eliezer was very conservative with what you could use to give to the temple. Remember, the Talmud, the oven of Achnai was a conflict between Rabbi Eliezer, who used the walls of the base medrash to come in and fold in on them if he was right, and they started to fold. God was on his side, and they said to him, "Excuse me, Eliezer, you cannot prove your deductions from the divine. Lo bashamayim he." Very famous Gemara. But he's also the one that said what you can use for the temple, what you can use for a korban, he's the one that said that for the lavatory of the Kohen Gadol. Remember, the 7 days before Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol was taken from his house and he was sequestered in the Parhedron chamber located on the Temple Mount. Well, he had to go to the bathroom, so they had to construct a toilet there. Well, what can you use for the construction? Can you use money? Does it have to be all money? Comes along Rabbi Eliezer and says, he paskins, you can use a harlot's payment to make the the toilet. And here this Notzri says, you know what, Rabbi? I got a proof from you. A posuk in Micah, from a place of filth to a place of filth. I told him, Al yedei zen it pasti leminus. I like that pshat. You can use the payment for a hooker to pay for the toilet of the Kohen Gadol. So the heretic was asking Rabbi Eliezer whether, if a harlot had been paid with building material, the material could be used in the construction of the Beis HaKisei in the chamber. Had she been paid in cash, it would certainly be permitted even to purchase an offering. Okay, and Tosfos has a big thing that we don't have to go into. And what does Rabbi Eliezer tell Akiva? Ovarti al masha kosav b'Torah. By being quiet, I didn't transgress anything. But v'hinati hadover, when I nodded my head with pleasure and understood what he was saying and listened to what he was saying and approved it, ovarti al masha kosav b'Torah, I transgressed what it says in the Torah, in Mishlei 5:8. Stay away from her, meaning the harlot, meaning minus, meaning Christianity, meaning sectarian Jewish ideas, zu minus. And don't let her come close to the door of your house, meaning rishus, to the doors of, don't get close to the Romans, don't get close to anyone who's in in power. Stay away from power. So here we have a Gemara that really grabbed me in terms of what Rav Eliezer of Hyrcanus was worried about when he had been grabbed, and he got off the hook, but he realized that somehow there was something connected to the meanness of the hegemon. Mida keneged mida. God, it's hatzur tomim polo. Mishpat. Mishpat means mida keneged mida. And that's, the Gemara just grabbed me in the sense that even something he got off on the hook, Rabbi Akiva had to remind him, no. There was something that you took pleasure in from someone else's Torah that was outside the tchum of Rabbanut. This idea that the hegemon somehow felt moved by Rabbi Eliezer's thinking he was sucking up to him reminded me of the introduction to Out of the Depths of Rabbi Lau. Here's the book. I read it over Yom Tov. And in the introduction, he doesn't wait to the last chapter to tell about his theology. He knows he's about to embark on a personal recounting of his survival in the death camp. And he wants you to know ahead of time in the preface. So he quotes from the Rebbe, the Rebbe Nachum Mendel of Kotsk. Remember, he was a Ger Chosid, his father. His father was in Pietrkov. And his father once came home beaten up by the Gestapo. He was very tall. They shaved him. They beat him up. He was only 8 at the time. It's his earliest memory. And he discusses this, how it shook him. But he says the following. The great Hasidic teacher Menachem Mendel of Kotsk used to say, I'm not capable of worshipping a God whose every path is clear to me. When everything is revealed and understood, that is a friend, not the divine. Faith is tested through unfathomable and inexplicable. That is the Kotsker Derech, by the way. In Kotsk, everything is by fire. It is through suffering. So now here, Rabbi Lau tells you his doxology. Right up front, in the beginning of his personal diary. I am a believer and I will remain so until my dying day. And then he quotes, God has tried me with suffering, but he's not given me over to death, from Psalms. I do not believe in coincidence, just like Rabbi Eliezer that we discussed, but in providence. The question for which I have not found an answer remains the question why. Well, Baruch Hashem, he understands that there is no answer to that question. Why did it have to happen? Why was my brother Milik torn from our mothers, etc., etc.? So, first of all, I love his honesty, okay? But let me share something even more profound with you. I want to share with you something that David Weiss HaLivni, who came from a similar place, from Siget, he was an Ilui that came to America. He survived in Auschwitz, in a work camp in Birkenau. And they sewed together sandbags where the cement, they took the paper, and in the work camp Volksburg, they wrote down the liturgy for Yom Kippur. They wanted to daven, and some people had photographic memories, so they wrote it down on the sandbag. It's called the Volksburg Machzor. You go online, you can see it in Yad Vashem. When they published the manuscript of the facsimile of these I think 20 sheets of paper with the Yom Kippur liturgy, they asked him to write the introduction. And at the end of the introduction, he talks about his experiences in the camp and how that Machzor came to be. Then he writes this: in contrast, I bring this to you in contrast to Rabbi Lau's optimistic but positivistic view that of classical Jewish theology. Tzadok Adin, Hatzur Tomim Polo. David Weiss HaLivni doesn't talk about that. Elsewhere in his in his book, The Sword and the Book, he talks about using Kabbalistic categories of Shvirat HaKelim and Cholol HaPonoi to explain the divine absence. But listen to what he says here. I'll conclude with what I myself experience. Didi Hava Uvda. It was by me a fact, as narrated in my memoir, A Leaf Not Driven. I was forced in the forced labor camp at Wolfsburg, one of the camps of Gross Rosen in Lower Silesia, from May 44 to February 45. In the camp, we were given a day off every second Sunday, during which we could remain in the camp and ostensibly tend to our own needs. But since the SS were looking for volunteers for work outside the camp, and such, inverted commas, volunteering consumed the entire day in hard labor, who could or would hide from them? On Sundays, unlike regular days of work, the SS did not call names according to their lists, but would seize people as they found them. Whoever was not caught this way was able to avoid the claws of the SS. But when there was a shortage of workers, the SS went looking, and whoever was caught hiding could anticipate a whipping, if not more. I was one of those caught. I was hiding under a bed, and an SS trooper enters the room. The room was supposed to be empty, but like a dog, he smelled the scent of flesh. When he raised his whip, I pleaded with him in German, and I began saying, Herr Obersturmführer, merciful one, harachamon, and I escaped by the skin of my teeth. Do you hear what's going on? The same thing, like the hegemon. By sucking up to him, Herr Obersturm, he knew German perfectly and was able to use the liturgy from the Yom Kippur, Av Horachamon, Avinu Malkeinu Av Horachamon, and he escaped because the German, being a sadist, likes nothing else than to be sucked up to and to be genuflected to. I cannot judge how much this supplication helped me stay alive and not collapse under the lashing. And now he makes the same confession of Rebbe Eliezer. But every day I grieve for having used the holy words of Yom Kippur liturgy merciful one, which appears in the sources only in relation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to pray for mercy from this villain. And I was just so moved by that story. Bringing this all together, my friends, as we go into the Zman Simchaseinu, we can't go into Simchaseinu because we're just commanded to. We have to go into the Simchaseinu following the Yom Kippur, bringing with us the cries of the Eile Estkara, the 10 martyrs, and from the Yizka prayer, and from the Volksburg Machzor, and from Rabbi Lau's experience, and the David Weiss Halivni, and all the other Kedoshim that we are carrying on our shoulders. We're taking all that into the Sukkah with us. So the Simchaseinu has to be not Tmimus, but Shleimus, as we learnt before, that the Medrash was trying to point out. Tomim, Darko, we have to reinterpret. It's not a simple Tmimus. It is Shleimus. Shleimus means I'm able to integrate both the sadness and the elegy and the Hatzur Tomim Polo and all the words that we use to be Tzodok Hadin in our funerary elegies for the past, for those who have lost, for those who we've lost personally, who are personal grieving. I want to end with something I've been reading recently. It's called Die Wise. My son Naftali opened me to this Native American writer who tells us that we're living in an age where we are so divorced from death in our culture that we've become allergic to it. He says, I wrote about suffering as a skill, as something to be learned and taught and defended. Suffering and learning how to suffer is how you make meaning from what seems random, chaotic, or pointless. This is what I mean by wrestling. Meaning comes from this kind of wrestling. I love that expression because Yisrael means he who wrestles with the divine. I think we're being called upon to wrestle, to be Yisrael, not to whitewash it, not to be Tomim, but to be shleimut with it, to say I'm going into the sukkah to enjoy my family, to enjoy the Shekhinah, to be in the presence of this holy schach. But I'm doing it with the weight of my tradition, with the weight of Chazal, with the weight of our history, which if we thought was important at the time of the 4th century, when the Bala Medrash was questioning the suffering patient, how much more so it is today towards the end of Galut. Have a wonderful Yontov, a Zman Simchaseinu in the truest, fullest sense of the word.